What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Gruesome Garage, and we're going to be making some more progress on my LS for my Cherokee. So as you can see, obviously I got a little more progress done since the last video. We've been doing running around here and there, so I've been taking the time here and there just to put stuff on, and I just wanted to throw it on. I'm sorry I didn't record it all, but it would have been really annoying with the little time I had to be able to not only try to install stuff, but try to record it too. I would have never gotten this far. So I want to go through some little annoyances that I've had putting this together. As you can see, we started putting the wiring harness on. I've test fitted my intake manifold, and some things that were supposed to fit obviously didn't fit, just like any other build. So I'm going to start with the water pump. This is a Holly water pump now. I wanted to use a stock water pump, and when I got this bracket kit for the power steering pump and the alternator, it said I could use a stock Ford truck water pump. Obviously that's not the case. If you look at this water pump, if we were to bolt on right there, that outlet is right into the alternator. So guess what? This water pump didn't work. Thankfully Holly makes something that is for the truck spacing that now my outlet is in a much better spot. Let's put the water pump down 2 seconds, and we'll go over to this pump. Now this thing is awesome. I love this wheel. I got this wheel instead of the factory wheel. That this is off of an F body, and it's so much easier to get to the bolts for the power steering pump. But not only that, but this is made out of metal. The F bodies are plastic, and everything else on my pulley system is now metal. So why am I gonna put a piece of plastic there? Thankfully eBay had this beautiful part advertised. It didn't have a little lip here where it's supposed to stop, so you're supposed to measure that out, and it's about 1/4 inch. It also is perfect with my pulley assembly. So that's all figured out, and my belt assembly is all figured out. Coming on to the valve covers. Now I bought these valve covers thinking that I would be able to bolt these coils right onto them, because the picture was different than when they actually came. I saw that, said no big deal. I threw the stock coil brackets on, and they just look like absolute garbage. I know the block isn't that pretty, it's peeling, blah blah blah, but you're not going to see that in the engine bay. I want the top to be pretty at least. So I got these brackets, and they said they would fit the stock truck coils. Maybe I'm just a complete idiot, but I looked online, I looked over the paperwork, and they said they would fit these coils, and they didn't. So, you know, easy solution. Went to the hardware store, picked up a couple of these spacers and longer bolts, and spaced them out. They work great. I got regular LS style spark plug wires because they're a little longer than the truck wires, and they seem to fit perfect. Another thing I almost forgot about was the dipstick. I snapped the dipstick off when I went to originally pull it out because it was rusted down here, and I actually got it out with an easy out, surprisingly enough. I couldn't believe it. Not only did I do that, but these bolts right here were snapped, and one of the motor mount bolts were snapped. All came out with an easy out. I can't believe it. I usually do not have that good of luck, but maybe because it's a Chevy, trying to show me that Chevy stuff is good, I gotta go to the dark side. But who knows. Alternator. I really wanted to use the factory alternator, but with these valve covers, the positive is right there. Now we could dent this out, but I really don't want to do that. I found an alternator online that sticks out right here, a positive post, so it's not going to be in the way of anything, and the bearings in here do not feel good anyway. I probably could have gotten away with it for a little bit, but this thing's definitely seen better days. Before we get, let's talk about the oil pressure. Now I have a new valley cover. This is not going to be the one I put in, but it's basically the same thing, where it does not have an oil pressure sending unit slot. So I used one of these adapters to put in the oil pressure sender. And if you look at my wiring harness, this is the oil pressure. It's not gonna be long enough. Thankfully, somebody on eBay sells extensions, so I'm gonna get a wiring harness extension so I don't have to cut and splice myself. I would have no problem doing it, but hey, if somebody makes something, why not? Trying to do this as much as bolt-on as possible. Another cool thing about this is that these two ports right here, if I decide to go turbo, I got myself a little oil feed. That's basically all the quarrels I had with the block and the motor. Let's get down to the intake manifold. We'll start with the bottom here. I plugged these up and I realized that this doesn't have a manifold air temperature port at all, really. I didn't want to stick it in here straight. Number one, it didn't fit and I didn't want to drill and tap it. And number two, if that connector's there, I'm not going to be able to connect it unless I pull the intake manifold off and do a little dance. So I made this solution. I don't know if it's going to work well or not, but now the sensor sticks out over here and it's a lot easier for me to plug in. As you can see also, I had to do a little washering when it came to the fuel rail, because for some reason I got these injectors. They're LS2 style injectors. The fuel rail and the intake manifold says it'll fit LS2 style injectors, so that's why I got LS2 style injectors. And guess what? The brackets are just a little too short, and if you tighten them down, it puts the whole fuel rail on a ridiculous angle instead of being straight like this, and it doesn't look like the injectors are seated straight. If you look now, the injectors look very nicely seated and ready to spray some fuel. The one thing that I've liked so far the best about this, putting this together, is how awesome this wiring harness is. I have the injector harness here. You can see these things just clip right on and off, and everything is super simple. The injector harness plugs right in the back over here, and then everything is basically ready to go when you're doing it. You see here, clicks right into the throttle position sensor, idle air control. This goes back here to my manifold air temperature. If you saw before, that's why I moved it down here, because I don't think I'm going to be able to go like this and try to put a connector in. Much easier to slide one over here. The ignition clicks right in over here to the stock pack, to the stock wiring harness. I could make my own, make it nicer, but it works. Crank or coolant temp plugs right in. Crank plugs right in. And like I said, the only really problems I had is the oil and my fuel pressure, because the factory fuel pressure sensor's up here. I'm gonna bring my fuel pressure sensor back onto the firewall with a regulator and everything, so I need to take this and extend this back. Luckily, the same company that makes this, and they're even the same connectors, so I just bought two of them. But that's pretty much it. This thing is the easiest thing to put together. This harness makes life so much easier compared to trying to wire one yourself. I could have used a factory harness, but why spend all the time? This thing's awesome. Even the connectors are factory Denso connectors, so you don't have to screw around with Chinese connectors. Some of those connectors you buy, you know, splicing pigtails when you're fixing wiring, are just absolute garbage. And these things are completely awesome. So if you're thinking about doing a standalone harness and LS swap, I would really highly suggest this, because this is insanely easy. This thing is basically ready except for the rear main to get onto the transmission. And look what I've been doing. Pulled the old disgusting Renix out, clearing out shit. And guess what? Here's the magical box that's going on the back. Already pulled the bell housing off. It's a couple of bolts. I gotta pull the snout off so I can replace the new snout with my snout, and we can put the new bell housing on here and get this thing cleaned up and ready for the motor. So we got the beauty on here now, and we changed the snout in the middle here to the snout that comes with the advanced adapter kit. And this thing is so much nicer than anything else on here, even though it is just another piece of cast. We also threw the clutch on, the rear main seal. Well guys, I got some bad news for you. We put the motor and trans together. Everything went smoothly. I was filming everything great. I put the motor in the Jeep and then realized that the SD card formatted. So let's go through some tips and tricks about putting this motor in, because obviously I lost all the filming. And then we're gonna try to get this beast started. So one of the major issues I had putting this together back in were the motor mounts down here. If you can see, that's the original hole where it's supposed to be. And this is where it is now. I learned that on Cherokees, older Cherokees, I'm guessing the Renix models and older, the unibody is actually narrower where the engine mounts mount to the unibody. And as you can see, my brackets are in there nice from Overkill Fab, but the biggest thing is it was too skinny. So I went to put the motor in, and one of the bolts was about 1.25 inches off, and realized that is not gonna work. So we went to the drawing board, figured out that if I drill the holes 3/4 inch over, we'd be all set. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, oh, you should have welded up that hole, you should have made a new bracket. But if you think about the tension of where this motor is gonna be, that other hole next to it is not gonna cause any issue whatsoever. So structurally, I think we'll be fine. And you know, this is perfect. I get to test it out and see if it will be fine. If they are fine, this thing will get a turbo. Another main issue I had was clearance. As you can see up here, I'm very close to the firewall over here with my aftermarket valve covers. A lot of people say aftermarket valve covers do not work whatsoever, but I wanted them to work. So I did a little massaging of the firewall. As you can see, I won't be using my heater core, my stock heater core again, as I smashed the upper inlet hose up there and made some clearance. And over here, it's just an absolute nightmare. If you can see, I had to adjust one of these coil pack brackets. So instead of them being nice and fancy and straight, I curved that one over a little bit because of the brake booster. I was thinking about denting out the brake booster a little because it just touched, but I thought that, you know, why ruin the strength and structure of the booster because of the diaphragm in there? Might as well just move the coil over. And now it works pretty darn good. One other major issue I have with this is clearance for the exhaust manifolds. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it was a real pain in the butt. I had to do a little massaging over there on the side of the unibody, and over here, I'm probably gonna have to cut my upper control arm mount bracket out. No big deal, I don't use them anymore, so it shouldn't be a problem, but that's a little close to the clutch. I'm probably gonna have to wrap that just to keep the heat away from the clutch, from the slave cylinder. But other than that, you know, my cross member sits exactly where it should with the transmission, and it fits in here a lot better than I honestly thought. I thought I'd have to do a little more massaging and this and that, but honestly, I'm really happy with it. As you can see, got my O2 sensor hooked in to the downpipe. I'm gonna bring that down around and mate it together with the other side, and then I'm just gonna bring a single pipe out the back. Keep it simple, keep it as high as possible and out of the way, but still be able to put a muffler on it and drive it. So I got everything quickly wired up because I wanted to start it for my friends this weekend, and I can't get past the Holly screen. I'm having an issue. It won't let me tap on this. It won't let me use it. A lot of people say they have a problem with the screen. So luckily, I bought myself this cable right here. And this Holly cable is gonna hook into the CAN bus system, and hopefully I should be able to set it up with my laptop. So over here, we're looking at the laptop. Oh look, 19 complete on my update. Once we get that updated, we're gonna hook this in and see if we can get it set up right. Did some research online and figured out that the reason my computer screen wasn't working is because from the factory, these things are pressed together way too tight, and the outside screen or the cover actually hits the touch screen, and then you can't actually use it. So I just pulled it apart and the touchscreen works. What a surprise. So I set it up and I have everything set up. Here's my starter. So let's say, turn this beast on, Matt, and see if we can get this thing cranking. I know it's only set up quickly. I'm gonna clean up some of the positive wires and everything, but I wanted to see if we can get this thing running before I finish the cooling system and everything. So now you can see that Matt has this over here that I can actually touch things now and go through them, where before I couldn't touch anything on the screen. It wouldn't work at all. Crazy how a simple thing like this plastic ring is gonna stop me from starting the motor. So I went through the wizard setup, I went through the GCF wizard and the throttle position sensor auto set, and it says that it's calibrated. So let's try to crank this thing. It's not good.
Battery's dead?
Sounds like my battery's dead. So it helps when you have the starter wire on, hooked up, so it's not trying to send all the voltage to the yellow thing. I thought my battery was dead, but no. So, attempt number 2 at starting this beast. Well, that's not a good sign.
Oh boy.
Sounds like we're starting to have some problems here. You know what? This seems like a good place to wrap it up. I wanted to get this thing started by the end of this video, but it seems like we're having some starter issues. So tune in next time, guys, and I promise you'll see this thing running and hopefully driving again.